Good evening. This is about that time Westminster Council decided I was a health hazard. So, I don't know if you've ever heard of breast milk ice cream, but if you've clicked on this, you probably have. So, the ice creamists here, this is their book, were an attempt to make ice cream a bit punk rock with unusual flavours and publicity stunts. So, this is their recipe book. And inside, in the acknowledgements, there's a dedication to me as a delightful squeeze. And here is a story about what happens if you Google my real name, how I got my Guardian contributor flair, and that time Westminster Council decided I was a health hazard, and why Lady Gaga threatened me with legal action. So before it became a transphobic hellscape, I used to use Mumsnet, like a Reddit for MILFs. It was full of useful advice. But the board I visited most often was the one for product tests. So you'd sign up and get all sorts of free stuff in return for reviews. So I got invited to a launch of a new nappy featuring Sporty Spice, very nice, free mini blender, household paint, baby clothes, that kind of thing. But one day I saw something a bit different, a request for someone to give breast milk to make ice cream. So I responded out of sheer curiosity, and Matt O'Connor, the writer of this book, responded. So did I think it was a sex thing? Oh, well, of course I did. I was prepared to shut the whole thing down immediately, but he was so utterly obsessed with ice cream to the exclusion of almost everything else. I quickly realised, no, it wasn't a sex thing. In fact, I don't think he ever thought of that to begin with. The other people posting on the board on Mumsnet definitely thought it was a sex thing, and it turned out I was the only person who had responded. So Matt O'Connor is food technologist and a marketer, and was actually part of the team that invented the Viennetta. He was also, a member of Fathers for Justice. And so I always kept him at arm's length a bit because I felt there was probably a good reason that you are being kept away from your kids. If you care to look him up, well, I don't think I was quite wrong about that decision. But anyway, so he explained he was launching an ice cream shop in Covent Garden and wanted to create a breast milk flavoured ice cream as a publicity stunt. And obviously he needed milk for this. So I'd be paid for my time and would have to do some interviews and a photo shoot. So I agreed to meet. I went to the ice cream shop, sampled some of the ice cream, their blasphemous absinthe lolly, which is very nice, and I must have signed some things. And we agreed that I should have some blood tests just to be sure that the milk was entirely safe. And now, I have to say, before anything else, human milk is so much safer than cow milk. Humans don't secrete milk from just near their bumhole, for starters. And while I don't think I have to say this, I will say it anyway. Human milk is safe for humans, obviously. But put a pin in that one. And I don't think this is even available anymore. I had this signed, obviously. You'll find out why. But after being tested, I did give them the milk that I'd already had in the freezer. I did also express some, which I actually had to do in front of somebody to prove that, I don't know, I wasn't getting milk from Tesco or something. I think overall they got around a litre's worth. That's like, I don't know how much that is in freedom units. You'll have to look it up for yourself. Anyway, Matt went through the ice cream making process with me, and it was clear there was no way he was ever planning to make gelato with just human milk. There wasn't going to be nearly enough. What he was making was a regular vanilla gelato with a human milk added as a flavouring. It's obviously a publicity stunt, and I could see he was a skilled marketer with a pretty good idea of what was going to get publicity and bring people in. So I don't know if you're familiar with Covent Garden, but there's a combination of artsy shop and basically a large concentration of tourist traps. And one of the more popular genres of tourist trap is the ice cream shop. And at the time, and even now if you happen to go there, you can see there must be half a dozen ice cream shops nearby, and most of them have some kind of gimmick. There's one in particular that serves your ice cream very fancifully in little petals in the cone, which I don't recommend. I don't recommend the shop because it takes a million years for you to get your ice cream. And even though it is very fancifully, beautifully presented, it tastes exactly the same as all the other ice cream anyway. And you're waiting for them to painstakingly scoop this flour out, and you have a kid with you, and the kid is having a meltdown because they don't know ice cream. Anyway, as part of this press package I'm making and the press release, I had some photographs done and agreed to do some interviews. It's the first and only time I've ever had my makeup professionally done, and I look reassuringly normal. So I had interviews with people like Zoe Williams of The Guardian and Nick Ferrari, indeed, of what was then TalkSport, kind of a conservative-leaning talk radio channel. It's now a UK streaming service called Talk TV, if you're interested. And, you know, I think I dealt pretty well with these people on the whole. And Zoe Williams, I think this is before she had any children of her own, responded quite negatively to the whole idea and said it would be disgusting. And I did try in the interviews to stick to a particular line that I decided in advance, which was this stuff is safe for babies, it does not taste disgusting, try it for yourself. And ask yourself why you don't think it's disgusting to drink cow's milk. I mean, I do appreciate some people do find that disgusting, which is fair enough, but you find it disgusting to drink the milk of a human, and that's weird. So I was thinking in particular about the scene in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy where Arthur Dent is faced with an animal in a restaurant who clearly wants to be eaten and requests it, and Arthur reacts in horror. It turns out this animal has been bred specifically to want to be eaten and make that very clear. And I was thinking about this when I made the point about how you don't really get to meet the cow when you have your regular ice cream, and you don't get to ask the cow what she thinks about the whole arrangement. I also decided that I was not going to highlight how little breast milk there was in this ice cream. So if you've breastfed a baby or you know someone who has, you will know that to produce enough ice cream to supply a central London-based ice cream bar, you need a whole army of people pumping 24/7. That was obviously not realistic. But I decided I wasn't going to talk about that unless I was explicitly asked. And in fact, it didn't come up. And that was okay. I'm just checking for the recipe here. Because most people, it turns out, are pretty ignorant about breastfeeding. And, you know, that suits me fine. Yeah, it is just, breast milk. A little bit of breast milk. So this is the recipe here. The day came and I was told there was going to be a press release and a press package including clips of me. And at this point I did something that, again, I'm very pleased with myself to do. You know, I think I was a clever little sod, and I still do. So this was, I think, 2011. And even in 2011, there was brigading, there was doxing, there were pylons, there were hateful comments, there were works. These things are not new. They existed in 2011. They exist now. And I was very aware that being a public named person involved in something like this, I mean, you can Google me, you can find me, but I'm not going to give my real name here. You can find that out. You know, you could do that. But I thought to myself, I don't fancy any of that. I was not ashamed at all. But obviously, I decided I did not want to wake up following the press release and the newspaper articles to a torrent of nasty, hateful remarks on my social media. And I knew it was going to be controversial. And I was reasonably active on social media at the time. I had a Twitter account. I haven't had a Twitter account for a while. I was vaguely using Facebook, not anymore. But the night before the press release came out, I went through all of my social media channels and I locked them down. I made them private, everything. So I don't use my real name for any of these, so that was pretty easy. It wouldn't have been that hard to find me, so I just made sure that if anybody did find me, search for me, tried to make comments to tell me what they thought of me, well, they just simply weren't ever going to get that opportunity. So I've been using the internet since 1993. I've been using Usenet and other channels ever since then. So, you know, I know what people are like. I know how people can be. I also have 2 separate journalism qualifications. I've got a diploma from the City Lit and then did a higher level, the nature of which escapes me right now, but that was a year-long course I did at Goldsmiths. So it isn't the case that I went into this with no media training and no awareness. And, you know, I have had that, and it turns out to be extremely useful. I also think that if I hadn't had that media training, you know, minimal though it is, things could have gone a lot worse for me, and I'll go into that in a moment. For some friends of mine, I'd warned my family in advance, but there were some emails from people saying, what have you done now? What have you been up to this time? And that was fine, you know, fortunately. And because I'd closed everything down, I did not get anything nasty sent directly to me. And I felt even more vindicated in my decision to do that when I decided to go and have a look at some of the press coverage. And yeah, when I read the comments on, say, the Daily Mail article, which incidentally knocked 10 years off my age, I was very happy about that. I never did get in touch with them to fix that. So I could use that to prove my age in Wikipedia. But anyway, I looked to the comments. The comments were amazing. I had HIV. I was disgusting. I was a pervert. All kinds of lovely remarks that made me feel very smug and clever, because these were remarks that will not be sent directly to my inbox or my Twitter feed. So yay for me. Again, what a clever little sod I am. But I know how that sounds. I don't want to imply that people who do get a bunch of online hate should have simply got good and done what I did, because not everyone has that option. Not everyone has had any media training, and some people need to use their social media for work, and most people end up in unfortunate situations that were out of their control. And I think that is definitely worse now than it was in 2011. So I was aware that the whole thing would get people quite irritated, so it was nice, it was peaceful for me. If I wanted to read comments about how I was a disgusting old hag who was out trying to get everyone sick, I could definitely do that. I chose not to. However, a few months after this whole incident, my husband on Twitter decided to point out to someone he was arguing with who I was and what I had done. Oh, and then I got piled on by people saying that not only was I disgusting and a pervert, but also I must be a fascist. That was interesting. And I must be anti-vax, because, yeah, I accept there's definitely an element of anti-vax in pro-breastfeeding spaces. Well, yeah, that I'm pretty sure that's still the case. It was definitely the case when I was involved. And I wasn't happy with that, because that control had been taken away from me. But, that was quite small. I just muted everyone. I didn't use Twitter for a few days. And that was a little echo of, I think, how bad all of that could have been. The other remark I encountered quite a bit, which, I did talk to some people about this and I picked them up on it, was people telling me, well, people who know nothing about me, and they said, why didn't you donate the milk? Why didn't you give it to the starving children who could do with that milk? What about your own child? Things like that. And to which I said, hey, it's not a limited resource. I had plenty of milk knocking around. My kid is fine. But also, something that most people don't know is in the UK we have breast milk banks. So we have donors who are not paid. I know in the US you can be compensated for giving milk to milk banks, not the case in the UK. And one of the limitations with donor milk is you have to have a baby under 6 months old. And the reason for this is that human milk changes with the age of the baby. So someone who's breastfeeding a toddler will have milk of a different composition from someone breastfeeding a newborn, or someone with a baby of like 3 or 4 months old. So at the time, I think my daughter was 18 months, and my milk was not acceptable for newborns, and that's what donor banks are intended for. They're intended for newborn babies. Donor milk is really important to prevent various complications that newborn, particularly premature babies, can have. So anyway, I didn't like these comments. First of all, it implies a severe lack of awareness of how breastfeeding works. Oh, why don't you do this? Well, if you knew anything about breastfeeding, you didn't need to ask the question. But also the idea that once breastfeeding is established, it's some kind of precious resource. Well, believe me, no, there can be a lot of it. There's no shortage, and if you pump, the more you pump, the more you get. So I really didn't like this ignorant assumption. By donating some milk to flavour some ice cream, I was taking food out of the mouth of hungry newborns, and that was clearly never the case. So after a couple of days and a huge amount of press coverage, and again, whatever Matt O'Connor had done in the past and done more recently, he is pretty good at marketing. But some other fallout started to happen. And now the first thing is I got declared a health hazard by Westminster Council. So somebody saw the press coverage and reported the ice cream to Westminster Council, who deal with health and safety for Covent Garden. And the health inspectors popped into the ice cream shop and demanded they took the ice cream off the shelf. They declared it was a biohazard. And once again, I would like to point out that no, human milk is not a biohazard for extremely obvious reasons. Human milk is safe for humans to drink. You don't even have to pasteurize it unless you leave it to go all disgusting and moldy. Well, you wouldn't do that. But no, human milk is safe for humans. You are much more likely to get sick from drinking cow's milk than human milk. You know, I also, as I said, I had blood tests for various bloodborne diseases, and these were hepatitis, all of the hepatitises, HIV, and a virus called HLTV1, which is a virus that can cause leukemia in rare cases. Feasibly, theoretically, it might be transmitted via breast milk, and that was my suggestion based on my research. So I think I underwent more tests than any dairy cow has ever had to show that the milk was safe. Again, as I say, the milk was also pasteurised, and the production of gelato involves simmering the mixture for some time. So even if it hadn't already been pasteurised, it definitely would have been after all of that. And again, you know, this is what my daughter was having, and she remains fine, she's now 16. So after a few days, Westminster Council having to done, I don't know what they did to the milk. They tested it in some form. They said, oh yes, sorry, it is fine. And I said, yes, I know it's fine. We all know it's fine. But some pinhead somewhere decided this was a health hazard. So following this declaration by Westminster Council that I was a health hazard, the other hilarious thing that happened was about a couple of weeks later, after the press release, after the raid and everything, and I know Matt loved that publicity. He called me very excited, and I said, go on, what is it now? And he said, oh, Lady Gaga's people got in touch with me because at the time the ice cream was named Baby Gaga as a pun on Lady Gaga. Also, obviously, the noise babies make if it needed explaining. So anyway, her lawyers got in touch with the ice creamists and said, you need to take her name off your, I quote, nausea-inducing product. And that was ever so funny to me. You know, I think she's a really interesting artist. She had at that point, I think, just done the publicity stunt where she turned up for an award ceremony in a dress made out of meat. And no, I don't think she had anything to do with it personally. I think her lawyers just didn't like the trademark infringement. I mean, had she heard of it, I'm pretty sure she would have found it funny and would have not been upset in any way. But Matt was ever so excited, and he made such a big fuss about that. But when the product was relaunched, and indeed in the recipe itself, he called it Baby Goo Goo to cover himself. I think he decided it probably wasn't worth getting into more trouble. So after all of this whole publicity stunt, I'm just looking for the absinthe one. Yes, it's called Sex Bomb. Matt invited me for a book launch for this recipe book here, which he had some more breast milk ice cream for sale. Oh, here it is. It comes with a shot of absinthe. It was really good. It's really good stuff. He managed to find someone else to donate the milk, which is probably just as well, because I think I'd stopped breastfeeding by this point. If you think I left it too long, then you may be surprised to know that in my family, I was one of I breastfed for, I think, the second shortest time of anyone in my family. And I won't go into details about that. Interestingly, for the book launch, I did try something, which is asking a designer of fancy clothes intended for breastfeeding mothers if I could borrow a dress for the launch. And the only reason I didn't manage to do that was I'd left it too late. But that would have been really fun to have turned up and had some photography and go, oh yes, I'm wearing whatever it was. And there are a couple of other things that happened later on. One of them was the university actually asked me to come in and do a talk with a conference they were having, which was actually about, I'm just checking the date, when was this printed? 2012, that sounds right. So they wanted me to do a conference they were having about breastfeeding more generally. That was really fun. People were super interested. So I talked in a panel. I was also asked to do a blog post for a company that sells baby products called Baby Pure. And the lady who runs it turns out to be really passionate about breastfeeding, and she wants to know what happened afterwards. So I told her about that. I also had a journalist from the Register reach out to me following another thing which is related to Mumsnet, which is maybe why I logged off Mumsnet and never came back, which was, I think this was 2013. They were supporting yet another thing. The UK government wanted to do some more internet censorship related to children. And I was like, if children are going online, taking your credit card and looking at pornography, that is a parenting issue, not a regulatory issue. And actually, I tried to get in touch with that particular journalist at the Register just to see what she thought. Unfortunately, the email address I had for her no longer works, but at the time, that was quite exciting. So would I do anything different if I could go back? Well, no. I mean, the only thing that ever gave me pause was Matt. I think I got to know him fairly well. And I did look him up on Wikipedia a few days ago. And what can I say but yikes? But, you know, I went into that with my eyes open. I could kind of guess because he was involved with, I was aware of Father for Justice, so I can't make any assumptions about him these days. Really, I'm sure maybe he's a decent guy. I don't know. That was my only contact with him. And the other thing is that you go down to Covent Garden today, you will not find the ice creamists or the lictators. They changed their name, not sure why. And the reason is that it became too expensive. The ice cream, I have to say, everything I tried was delicious, but the products they were selling were so labour intensive and expensive in terms of the ingredients. They would just use the best stuff. And unfortunately, despite O'Connor being good at marketing, it wasn't enough. Some people found the aesthetics of the shop kind of off-putting. It was very dark in there, and so they weren't going to come in. You can only take curiosity so far. So, example, the absinthe, that was nice. It was definitely an acquired taste. And I think passing trade was getting deterred, because of the way the shop was decorated. Again, I think if you've got small children who want an ice cream, that's probably not the place you're going to go. Maybe as a late night venue, it would have worked better. But yeah, the business rates went up, and it just wasn't economical to continue that business anymore, unfortunately. I think they did also have ice cream that they were selling like in supermarkets for a while. I haven't seen that for quite some time. But if you go down to Covent Garden today, it's a soulless, touristy kind of hell. It's always full of some big brand or other doing a sponsored thing. It's much less cute and exciting than it used to be. I mean, that's the case everywhere. If you go to Camden Market, you've got the same problem. Everyone's just selling the same crap they got from Alibaba. And I do think it's a shame that something interesting and unique in the ice cream selling space disappeared, and you still have the awful shop selling tediously produced ice cream roses for the Instagrams. But you also have the London Transport Museum, which, definitely go there. It's great. So those are my thoughts on Baby Gaga. Oh, one other thing is, how did I get my contributor flair to The Guardian? And the reason is, I do have a journalism diploma. And so a couple of days after the whole thing blew up, I got in touch with The Guardian with a pitch and said, hey, do you want to hear from me? And I ended up getting commission, and I got paid £300 for it. And so that's the story. I'm not even sure, as I say, I'm not sure if this is still in print, but there are some fun recipes in here. Now, freshly squeeze. Oh yes, they had somebody dress up as Lady Gaga just to make it really clear that's what they meant. Where's that picture? Where is she? Yeah, they've got this lady here. We've got a model, so I had to stand around with her. She was quite nice. We've got just the regular vanilla ice cream, Priscilla cream of the desert. So a lot of these are really ordinary ice cream recipes. We've also got the Lady Chiller rose petal ice cream, marmalade ice cream. Oh yes, brown. Oh, it's just nice. That's just generally nice. Peanut ice cream. No, thank you. So yeah, the sex bomb ice cream is claimed that this is some kind of really dangerous thing, but it's just literally ice cream with absinthe in it. Apocalypse chow with with chili in it. We've got the absinthe isolate, which I did have one. Super nice. But you can see that's kind of a provocative thing to do, and if you're going through Covent Garden with your I think he did these in the shape of a willy. Yeah, these had a very suggestive shape, is all I will say. So if you've got a kid and they've just been to the London Transport Museum and you want to go get an ice cream, I can see why people maybe didn't go in there quite as much as you'd want. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that didn't go on too long. And Happy New Year. I'm going to turn this off.